When I was in elementary and middle school, my favorite kind of games to play were JRPGs, Japanese role-playing games. This was late 90s to early 2000s, so I'm talking games like Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, Legend of Legaia, and Grandia 2, just to name a few. While the unique aesthetic and gameplay style of these JRPGs definitely appealed to me, it was the story that I was really there for. Back on the PlayStation 1, having a game that focused on story was rare, but not in JRPGs. In that era, JRPGs had the best, if not only, stories on the market. While nowadays, a narrative incentive of some kind is so prevalent that even Madden and NBA 2K throw a story mode in every couple of years. With that being said, JRPGs, in my honest opinion, have become a little bit of a joke.
It was as you said, Lord David.
Lord David.
That is all, Lord David. I pray for your success.
It's a genre that the narrative design is so stuck in the past that some of its fans will readily admit to you how bad they expect things like the voice acting, dialogue, and story to be in the upcoming release they're most looking forward to. But that doesn't mean we don't still enjoy the hell out of them. Tales of Arise is the latest big JRPG to hit the scene, and fans of the genre are buzzing about it. And one look at it was all it took for me to know I had to have it. The Tales series dates all the way back to 1995 on the Super Nintendo, and big changes do not come very often to the series, especially since new Tales games come out pretty often. Tales of Arise is the next big change for the Tales series, with a new game engine for a new console generation, even though you're looking at the PS4 version right now. This is the 17th main entry in the Tales series, so is a new engine enough to keep this old girl chugging? Well, have a seat and allow me to pour you a pineapple gel. I'll tell you exactly what I thought. By the way, I hope you know this is very expensive. Oh, use a coaster, please. I've always thought of the Tales series as a B-movie version of Final Fantasy, but I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as in, it's not going to appeal to as many people as Final Fantasy because it's not as accessible, but hardcore fans of the genre will still be excited to play it, and weebs. But Tales of Arise is the most accessible game in the series yet. Certain aspects of combat have been simplified and or changed depending on how you look at it. Like healing magic now has its own dedicated resource called CP, while special attacks cost no resources at all. In past games, special attacks and healing magic use the same resource, like TP, for example. Okay, I'm sorry, Bandai Namco, but someone on your localization team is clearly doing this on purpose. Speaking of the developers, I have to say, they've almost perfected their gameplay loop to a science, if you ask me. It goes like this. You come to a new area. It's beautiful and very different from the last area you came from. Exploration is encouraged while not being overwhelming. In fact, it's rewarding. While you're running from chest to chest, you're constantly picking up trash off the floor. I mean materials that you'll use for the crafting system. I'm not a fan of crafting systems, but this one never bothered me. It served its purpose just fine. Fights in the open can be triggered whenever you want, since battles are not random and can be easily avoided, since your main character can run for his life at all times. Combat in Tales of Arise made some of the past games almost feel restrictive in comparison to me. Instead of using your special attacks or attack magic sparingly, because it's usually tied to a resource, now you can go absolutely wild because special attacks are now tied to a cooldown meter, and the higher the meter gets as you level, the more special moves you can do before having to wait for a cooldown. And you really want to get that meter's capacity as high as possible, because when fighting the regular enemies, each attack builds up a stagger-like meter, Once that's full, you can use one of your special ultimate anime FMV attacks, which kills that enemy and hits all the other foes as well. You rinse and repeat this until all of the enemy is dead. And this was so fun to me. I'd usually start a combo on the ground just to launch the enemy in the air and then do another long combo where my guy is literally floating in the air juggling the enemy. So that's 90% of what you're doing in the game, but you know it couldn't be perfect, right? The one thing that I absolutely dreaded during at least half of the game were the boss fights. Remember all that fun stuff I talked about with the stagger meter and throwing enemies up in the air for those awesome air combos? The ones that make up half of your special moves? All of that gets thrown out of the window for the boss fights. All of a sudden, the game becomes a race against time while you slash away at a brick wall. What do I mean by that? All of the bosses telegraph the majority of their moves, and all of the game's characters, who you can play as and switch between whenever you want by the way, have a timing-based dodge or guard mechanic. With proper timing, you could dodge all the damage yourself, but the problem is that your AI partners are going to get hit by every single attack that comes their way, no matter how telegraphed it is. So now your healer is constantly healing your party instead of you. Now it's become a race against the clock to see if your resources can keep your party alive long enough for them to keep the boss occupied while you slash away at its magical shining toe or some shit. Oh, and that's another thing that pisses me off. When you get a boss down to half health, you do one of those cool special anime attacks that I was talking about earlier, but it happens no matter what. Whenever you break the boss's shiny toe, it's staggered for a long time, and it's your chance to dump all of your most powerful attacks. But if you break the core as the monster reaches half health, you've just wasted that staggered phase and won't get another one for a while. For a game so reliant on its action combat, I thought more could have been done to make boss fights more enjoyable. I never lost a boss fight, but I finished most of them feeling a little frustrated, because I'd have to spam items near the end of each one. I think the big question though is, how did I like the story? The story was pretty good to me. While I enjoyed the Tales of Iron Mask and the Blazing Sword taking on the Lords of the Land, the game still falls into a lot of tropes that the JRPG genre still can't shake off. For example, no matter what, no one can talk over each other, ever. Even though the game's cutscenes run on their own, they're not a huge step up from the days of hitting X between every sentence back on the PS1. I have a hard time getting invested in characters when they have to communicate like robots to each other. The game has over 300 optional cutscenes that are tied to trophies and other things, and I'm sorry, but these characters are just not that interesting to me, especially Law. Some people don't like Law. Here's why I think Law is stupid. Minor spoiler warning. Skip to avoid it now. At one of the game's main narrative moments, Renwell, the last surviving mage of a clan that was murdered by a single witch named Almedra, finally comes face to face with that evil witch herself, along with the rest of the party. She understandably becomes very angry and explains how wanting to see Almedra die has been the only thing keeping her alive, and that she's finally ready to get some of that sweet revenge. At this moment, Law goes, excuse me? Did you just say revenge? That's... Oh gosh, I don't know. That sounds kind of mean. And Law proceeds to protect Almedra, the murderous witch, from Renwell, saying he can't let her go down this evil path of revenge because he knows what it'll do to her or some bullshit. Even when tensions die down and the pair talk about it again, Law still has no real answer for Renwell as to why he did that. Is she supposed to just be nice as she faces her enemies on the battlefield? Also, how many people have they killed until now to get here? You might not be surprised to hear this, but you end up fighting Almedra and defeating her anyway. But the kicker is that Renwell by then has learned some kind of lesson, and she then explains to the Lord of the Land that Almedra is going to be taken to the authorities. Shortly after, Almedra ends up dying anyway because, what authorities? She's the Lord of the Land. Are you stupid? As you've probably gathered by now, the game requires you to suspend your belief, just like every other JRPG. But if you can overlook that, there's a real gem to be found in Tales of Arise. From an exciting combat system to absolutely gorgeous visuals, there's a lot here to sink your teeth into for hours and hours. And if you've been curious about what all the fuss about Tales is, Arise is the perfect game to see for yourself. I love Hootle. Thanks for watching. Okay. Lords of the Land. The game still falls into a lot of tropes that the JRPG genre still can't shake off. Falls into a lot of tropes that the JRPG genre still can't shake off.